everyone, welcome back to Faith and Flour. This is Robin and I am getting it done in the kitchen this week, giving you some homemaking motivation. And I'm starting off with managing our freezer inventory. I consider this part of my extended pantry or prepper pantry, and if you want to know more about that, I will have my series linked down in the description box and in the cards above. An important part of that is managing the inventory and making sure that I'm rotating through the things that we have so that things stay fresh here in the freezer. And I've allowed it to get really full. So throughout the week, I've been making sure that I know what is in here and using the things that need to be used in our meals this week. Our freezer is not the only area that needs managing. We have fresh produce in the refrigerator. We have some things that are more shelf stable in the pantry. And this week I'm paying close attention to those things to be sure that I use them in all of our meals. But before I start cooking anything, I always like to start with a clean kitchen. So after putting all of the dishes away that were drying from the night before, I've got some breakfast dishes that I need to take care of. And these metal cups that we use for drinking water throughout the day need to be washed as well. And then I'm going to use some bananas to make banana bread. And you guys have seen me make banana bread before, but I'm going to try a different recipe. This is from the Mrs. Fields cookie book. If you guys remember how popular Mrs. Fields cookies were back in the 80s, every mall had a Mrs. Fields cookies and there was always a huge line. I received this cookbook as a gift when we first got married, and the banana bread recipe in there is so good. Today I'm going to swap in gluten-free flour for the all-purpose flour so that our whole family can enjoy it. I've tried this several times and I think this is our new go-to banana bread recipe, so I'll share it with you today. I will have my version of this recipe down in the description box so that you can cut, paste, and print if you like. It's easy to make it either way, the traditional way or gluten-free. I will have that down there for you as well. But basically you start off with combining the dry ingredients. So that's the flour, either all-purpose or a gluten-free blend, along with baking soda and salt, and then just mix it together with a wire whisk and set it aside. Combine 6 tablespoons of salted butter that's softened with 3/4 cups of light brown sugar, and then cream it together with an electric mixer. Next, add an egg and the vanilla. The recipe calls for about 1/2 teaspoon, but I never measure, and what I probably wind up putting in there is closer to a teaspoon, but I figure the more vanilla, the better. And then about 3 medium bananas, and I like the bananas to be quite ripe. So I never mind if we have bananas that are starting to get really ripe because it's the perfect excuse to make this banana bread. Once all of the wet ingredients are well combined, you can add the dry ingredients along with 1/2 cup of chopped walnuts. And the walnuts are optional, but trust me, they make this bread over the top delicious. Mix everything at about medium speed just until it's well combined. the batter into a prepared loaf pan. I prefer to use the silicone loaf pan because I don't have to grease the pan ahead of time. But of course, if you have a traditional loaf pan, make sure that you butter it or spray it with some cooking oil before you add the batter. The bread will need to bake for 70 minutes in an oven that has been preheated to 325 degrees Fahrenheit. Nothing beats the smell of banana bread baking in the oven, so be prepared for your kitchen to smell like heaven. And while the banana bread is baking, I decided to go ahead and pull out some ground beef for the dinner that I'm planning tonight. That way it can be thawing throughout the afternoon while I'm getting some other things done. I made the banana bread with breakfast in mind, but who can resist warm banana bread? So I had to slice into it, and then I buttered up a slice for myself and one to surprise Patrick with upstairs while he's working. In a recent video, I was showing you guys this peace lily that I have, which is super healthy but never bloomed. And lo and behold, right after I published that video, a bloom arose. So I don't know if the lesson here is to complain, but suddenly it's happy and it's produced a bloom. So I will just hope for more. And my two orchids that sent up flower spikes this year are starting to open and bloom, and they are so beautiful. So this one looks a little bit green yellow right now, but ultimately it will be yellow. And then this other one, it's hardly even opening, but it is a beautiful white color, and the inside will be sort of that pretty pink orchid color. So I just love seeing them emerge each year. I have two on this sort of windowsill that didn't bloom this year, and I never can figure out why some do and some don't. They all get the same amount of light, they all get fed the same way, but that's the way it goes. And then outside, I'm trying to take care of our little vegetable garden. It's really tiny this year. We just have the tomatoes, a banana pepper plant, and some basil. Those are the things that always do really, really well. And since we're probably going to be doing a little traveling this summer, I just wanted to stick to the basics. The rest of the day, I just tried to take care of my daily sort of checklist, and on that was ironing. So I worked on that while keeping an eye on Austin in the backyard and various other things until it was time for me to leave to go pick up Peyton in the afternoon. couple of errands after picking up Peyton, and by the time we got home, it was time to get dinner started. So I opened up this recipe book where I have compiled a bunch of recipes that are family favorites that I turned into gluten-free recipes. And one of Peyton's all-time favorites is this cheeseburger pie. And this is just that really easy recipe that you find on the back of a Bisquick box, and you just use gluten-free Bisquick. I will put a link to that original recipe down in the description box. I make a couple of very minor modifications, and I'll show you that later in the video. And then in the spirit of using up the things that we have in the refrigerator, making sure that we're using our produce while it's fresh, I have a couple of zucchini, a bell pepper, and some onions, and I'm gonna throw those things together along with some leftover pasta sauce to make sort of a ratatouille type dish. And this is something that Patrick really loves, so I feel with this meal I really got everybody covered. The two modifications that I was talking about before are adding a splash of Worcestershire sauce and liquid smoke to the ground meat. And this just gives it a really nice sort of hamburger flavor in my opinion. So it's worth adding these things, but you can certainly leave them out. To get the ratatouille started, I just combine a little bit of olive oil and onions and let them start sauteing while I am putting together the batter for the Impossible Cheeseburger Pie. For the batter, you just combine milk, eggs, and the Bisquick. You whisk that together, and then you're going to layer everything in a pie dish. I always spray the bottom of the pie dish with just a little bit of oil, and then I add the meat and onion mixture, spread that out. Then I pour the batter over that and then top it with cheese. I think in the original recipe they put the cheese and then the batter on top, but I've always done it this way. It probably works great either way. And the last modification I'm making tonight is using this blend of Swiss and Gruyere cheese in place of the cheddar cheese. I usually use cheddar in this recipe, but I know this is probably going to taste great, and I already have this package of cheese open in the refrigerator. It needs to be used, so it's going in. For the ratatouille, I'm just now combining all of the vegetables. I'm seasoning it with a little herb de Provence, and I never measure anything, so you're not gonna find a recipe down in the description box. Just try to follow along and use whatever you have on hand. And so I like to add a little bit of chicken stock to this, and I like that better than bouillon, so I just mix that with a little bit of water. That just gives it a little bit of flavor and moisture. And then I had half a jar of just marinara sauce in the refrigerator. So lots of times I'll use canned tomatoes, but instead I'm going to use this. And I just want to make sure I get all of it out of the jar, so I add just a tiny bit of water to that, shake it up and add it in, and then I just let this saute on the stove top. That's it. Super simple, but it has a ton of flavor. And like I said, this is one of Patrick's very favorite vegetable dishes. I have to laugh because as I'm filming this, the guys are standing behind me waiting for me to hurry up and finish so they can grab their dishes. It's been a while since I talked about my sourdough starter, but it is still going and we are still enjoying so many things that I produced from this. The things that we like the most probably are English muffins and biscuits, and I very rarely make a sourdough loaf, and partly because there's a really good no-knead one that's pretty simple to do, but the more sort of traditional loaves are a lot more complicated, and until recently I was pretty intimidated by that. But I was determined today to really dig in and try the recipe that Lisa from Farmhouse on Boone recently put up. Ever since she talked about it, I've been wanting to try it, and today is the day. So I am going in I am making a couple of sourdough loaves in sort of a more traditional style, and I'm really excited to see how it turns out. I will put a link to Lisa's video from Farmhouse on Boone down in my description box because her instructions are amazing. She takes you step by step through in her video, so there's no question about how each step works. I found this to be such a great video, and so if you're interested in this, definitely check that out. One of the few sort of silver linings or blessings that have come out of the pandemic for our family is rediscovering sourdough. And so I had done this years ago, but our son has celiac disease, and so we pretty much steer clear of gluten, except for when it comes to bread. And one of the main reasons for that is that gluten-free bread is very expensive. I have not found any recipes that my son likes when I make it from scratch, so it is just more economical for our family, for the rest of us to eat regular bread and keep his gluten-free bread separate, and he's totally fine with that, and everything else we eat gluten-free for the most part. I'm really grateful for his great attitude because it has allowed me to rediscover the joy of bread making and getting my hands in the dough and all of that. Gluten-free baking is quite a different experience, and while it's rewarding in and of itself, it's just not quite the same. So in making sourdough bread, there are quite a few steps. It doesn't really take a lot of time on your part. It's just that at certain times there are some active steps. So it's a great thing to do when you're staying at home for the day and you've got lots of other things going on, because you can kind of pop into the kitchen, do what you need to do, and then get back to whatever else it is. So I really enjoyed that throughout this day, and I just had a lot of fun following Lisa's instructions and just sort of anticipating how this was going to turn out. Once each loaf is formed, you put them into a bowl that's lined with a tea towel and some flour, and then you bag that up so that it stays nice and moist and put it in the refrigerator for the bulk ferment, which takes 12 to 14 hours or overnight. So I had an interesting time trying to find bags that my bowls would fit into. I had these sort of extra large Ziploc bags, but my larger bowl wouldn't work, so I just grabbed a grocery bag that I had saved from a recent trip, and that worked pretty well. So the next morning you take them out and put them on a floured piece of parchment paper, and I was going to try my hand at scoring the dough to make a pretty pattern. So of course I had an idea in mind of how this was going to turn out, and as you'll see, it didn't quite work out, but that's okay because it didn't affect the taste. I knew right away that I had made a couple of mistakes because I forgot to flour the top of the bread before scoring it, because that helps the design to show up a little bit better. And also I just used a really sharp knife because I didn't have a razor blade. But if any of you are experienced bakers, I would really appreciate any hints you could give me. Put them down in the description box so that everyone can learn from your knowledge. This was how the first loaf turned out. Not exactly how I had envisioned it, but it's still beautiful. It's still golden brown and it looks so yummy, and our kitchen smells amazing. With the second loaf, I was determined to get it right. So I turned it out onto the parchment paper and sprinkled it with a little flour, spread it around, and then tried my hand at a different type of scoring pattern to see if that would work out a little better. The bread bakes really well in a covered Dutch oven. You bake it at a really high temperature, 500 degrees Fahrenheit, for about 20 minutes, and then you uncover it and bake it for the remaining time, about 25 minutes, at 475, I believe she said. And this one came out really well too, although the scoring pattern didn't work out either. So like I said, if you guys have some hints on how to get some prettier scoring, I would really appreciate it. But in the end, it really didn't matter. These loaves were delicious. I couldn't wait to cut into one of them. I let them cool just a little bit and then sliced into it. And I think Patrick could smell it upstairs because he showed up pretty soon and he totally approved of the bread. He loved it. This recipe was well worth the effort. The technique and all of that really proved to make this loaf light and airy on the inside. The crust was perfectly crispy and chewy on the outside. I was in love and I can't wait to perfect my method, and who cares if the scoring didn't turn out. What matters is the taste and the texture. So this is definitely worth trying, so make sure you check out that video. If you enjoyed today's video, be sure to give me a thumbs up. I hope that it gave you some motivation and inspiration for using up the things you have in your freezer, your pantry, and refrigerator to make some delicious meals this week, and to have fun in your kitchen, maybe spend a little extra time on a baking project of your own. And if you haven't already done so, make sure you subscribe. It's easy and absolutely free. All you have to do is click on my picture. I look forward to talking with you in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, have a wonderful week.